Good morning, grade 7 students. Today is April 13, 2020, and welcome to our topic, transitive and intransitive verbs. Before we discuss our topic, let us have the 3 expectations first. Number 1. Play the instructional video and answer the questions posted on this video. Number 2. Complete the assigned core task. Number 3. Complete the Mastery Connect quiz. Transitive and intransitive verbs. Learning objective. All students will use transitive and intransitive verbs in different contexts. Now, before we study or learn more about transitive verbs and intransitive verbs, let us have action verbs first. What are action verbs again? Action verbs tell what action someone or something is performing. These are the examples of action verbs: run, kick, play, study, buy, begin. Now, don't forget or always remember that action verbs are described as transitive verbs and intransitive verbs. But you might be asking, how are we going to identify or how are we going to know if the verb that we use already in our sentence is a transitive verb or an intransitive verb? Let's see. A verb can be described as transitive or intransitive based on whether it requires an object to express a complete thought or not. Now let's check. It says here that a verb can be described as transitive or intransitive based on whether it needs an object. What is this object then? Why do we need an object? We need an object to express a complete thought, to make our sentence clear or complete the meaning, to complete the meaning of our sentence. But some verbs, they do not need also an object. They don't need any object at all. But how? And why? And when? That is a good question then. Let's move on. How to identify a transitive verb? An action verb is transitive if the receiver of the action is named in the sentence. There is a receiver of the action. Don't forget, a transitive verb, it needs a receiver of the action. But what is this receiver of the action? The receiver of the action is called object of the verb. Another question again you might be asking. How are we going to identify this object? We are going to identify this object by asking 2 questions. These are the questions that you are going to ask. What? Who? Now, let us practice asking these questions to identify our transitive verbs in these sentences. Number 1. Please bring coffee. What is our verb here? Bring. And it says here, bring is transitive. But why? How? Because it has an object. And what is the object? Let us ask this question. Please bring what? Coffee. There is an object here. Its object is coffee, the thing that is being brought. Without an object of some kind, this verb cannot function. Number 2. Jenny threw the ball. Let's ask again the question. Jenny threw what? Ball. There is an object here. meaning to say there is a receiver of the action. And what is our verb here? Through. So this through is a transitive verb because it has a receiver of the action, or it has an object. Number 3. She loves rainbows. Our transitive verb here, loves. But why? Because it has an object here. Harold called who? Jim. Yesterday. Then, this called is an example of transitive verb. Why? Because it has an object here. Let's check. Harold called who? Jim. Jim is our object. So this called is a transitive verb. Now, let's check your understanding. Now let's move on to identifying an intransitive verb. An action verb is intransitive if there is no receiver of the action named in the sentence. No receiver, meaning to say there is no object. An intransitive verb does not have an object. Let us have these examples. Number 1. The class began. As you can see, the class began. There's no object here. Why? Because the meaning or the thought of the sentence is already clear. So began is an example of intransitive verb. Number 2. They jumped in the PE class. What is our verb here? Jumped. And jumped is an example of intransitive verb. But why? Because it does not have the receiver of the action. But what about in the PE class? What is this then? In the PE class is not an example of object. This is an example of prepositional phrase. So, the word jumped here is an example of intransitive verb. Number 3. The dog ran quickly. What is our verb here? Ran. And this is intransitive verb. Why? Because there is no receiver of the action run. Like if we are going to answer the question, the dog ran what? Can we get an answer from this sentence? None. There is no answer for the question what. Even the question who, there is no answer. So this ran is an example of intransitive verb. Number 4. The employees gathered in the conference room. What is our verb here? Gathered. And this is an example of intransitive verb. Why? Because in this sentence, there is no receiver of the action. There is no object. Because if we're going to ask, the employees gathered who? Can we get the answer for the question who? No. There is no answer, I mean to say. How about the question what? The employees gathered what? Do we have an answer for the question what? No. Nothing. None. So this, gathered, is an example of intransitive verb. Now let's check your understanding again. Some action verbs can be transitive or intransitive. You need to determine if the verb has an object or not. Like how? In my examples, I use only one word because I want you to see the clear difference of transitive verb and intransitive verb using one word only. Number 1. The pilot flew the plane. What is our verb here? Flew. Flew what? The plane. We have an object here. Because we have an object or since we have an object, this is an example of transitive verb. How about the next example? The plane flew to Canada. Let's ask the question then, what? The plane flew what? Can we get the answer of the question what? No. The plane flew who? Can we get the answer of the question who? No. So, this flew is an example of intransitive verb. So I hope this one is clear for you. Let's practice. The guest rang the doorbell. Number 2. The doorbell rang and the dog barked. Your turn. Now, for relevance to real-life application, using transitive verbs and intransitive verbs, I want you to construct your sentences using these images. Okay, so I want you to create your own verb here and use it in your sentence. And we have another image here. And the last image or images, all right, this one. Okay, now for our expert group activity, group 1 will have a list of sentences. They have to underline the verb and determine if it's transitive or intransitive verb. They will also construct 2 sentences that contain the rules of transitive verbs and intransitive verbs, using the images. Group 2 or B will construct 5 sentences that contain the rules of transitive verbs and intransitive verbs using the images. Group 3 or C will create a short quiz about the rules of transitive verbs and intransitive verbs using the pictures or the images. Now, if you're done with your work, please don't forget to click the Turn In button right away after you complete your work in Google Slides. And don't forget, please answer the Checking for Understanding through your Mastery Connect. Please see the ID posted on the Google Classroom. That's all for today, students. Thank you and best of luck.